Washington Journal continues.
Kirk Johnson is with us now. He was a USAID contractor in Iraq back in 2005 and now is executive director of something called the LIST Project. What is the LIST Project all about?
The longhand version is the LIST Project to resettle Iraqi allies. And when I came back from Iraq, I found out that a number of my former Iraqi colleagues who had been working with me for the United States government were being hunted as a consequence of that collaboration with us. And since I've been back, several of my Iraqi colleagues on whom we depended have been killed. And so what I started was a project that endeavors to help these Iraqis navigate a very complicated resettlement process as refugees to make it to the United States, because I believe that we have a moral obligation to this particular group of Iraqis.
Now you'll be testifying this morning here in town in front of the Helsinki Commission. What are you going to tell them?
Well, I think we're going to talk about the supposed progress that's been made over the past year on this issue. There have definitely been steps in the right direction through the Kennedy legislation and SIV legislation, but there simply still isn't a swift enough process that's been put in place. And right now, the LIST Project has roughly 1,000 names of Iraqis who are running for their lives, and they are not being expeditiously resettled, and they don't have the luxury of time, frankly.
We invite you to phone in with your questions and comments for our guest. Resettling Iraqi refugees in the U.S. is the topic here for the next 25 minutes. Lines for Republicans, Democrats, and Independents. Our guest is Kirk Johnson, former USAID contractor in Iraq, now runs the LIST Project. You said things aren't swift enough in being able to get these folks over here. Explain what you mean.
Well, let's say you've been serving the United States government, as many of these people have, and one day you leave the green zone and a militia identifies you as a collaborator. What typically happens is that a death threat is leveled against you. You flee the country, and you are forced to go through a seemingly never-ending series of steps where sometimes you have to wait months and months and months in between interviews. Oftentimes there's a 7-stage interview process, which draws from many different entities, often which don't have the staff that they need in the region. And you tell your story over and over and over again. And remember, these are, I would guess, the most documented refugees on the planet. These are Iraqis that have had background checks by the U.S. government to work for us. On average, it takes, from what I've seen, and I've been doing this for a year and a half now, most of the Iraqis have been waiting, in a lot of cases, almost 2 years. And out of those 1,000 names that we've been pushing, around 100 have made it in. So, I mean, the sort of proof is in the pudding, as they say. Let
me see if I understand the numbers properly, and we have them on the screen. Iraqi refugees resettled in the U.S. in October of '07. The number was 450. You can see 200 or more in November, December last year. January of this year, the number went to 375. February went to 444, up to 751 in March. April, under 1,000. May of this year, 1141. But I see on the bottom, U.S. goal for fiscal year, 12,000. How do you get from that number all the way up to 12,000? What has to happen?
Well, the State Department, which has been trying to keep up with this issue. They simply don't have the resources to do this, and they don't have the political will from the White House, since our president has yet to utter a syllable about what he thinks we owe these Iraqis who are endangered for helping us. But frankly, you know, they're not on pace to hit the 12,000 mark, but the bar to me seems so low that if they hit it, you know, great. But I mean, there are 4 million Iraqis that are displaced, which is the equivalent of 50 million Americans in terms of percentages. And if you think about, you know, the kind of trauma that Katrina inflicted on our nation in terms of the displacement, we're talking about massive numbers. I'm not proposing that they all be resettled here, but from my end, you know, we've been passing, you know, troves of documentation to the government for 15 months now, and they're not making it through with any speed.
Virginia Beach, our first call for Kirk Johnson. Hey there.
Hello, how are you?
Fine, go ahead.
Okay. I had the TV muted for a minute before I got to the rest of what was going on, so you may have covered this. I'm not sure. My question is who would make the determination, or who will make the determination as to who is eligible, and what kind of criteria do you have for that? Checkpoints and so on.
More about the process. Thank you, caller.
Well, the Congress has, in their newest legislation, laid out criteria, and it's working for the U.S. government, for U.S. government contractors, for our military. Many of these Iraqis are interpreters for our troops. And so there is there's two entities that manage our refugee processing, and it's the Department of State that does a lot of the initial work, and then the final gatekeepers is the Department of Homeland Security. And they'll go to the region and do background checks, in many cases again, and substantiate that these Iraqis have helped us, and that as a consequence they're endangered.
Do you have a sense of how much this costs to bring one of these folks to this country from start to finish? What's the price tag? I'm
told that, and from what I've seen by some estimates, that the average cost to resettle an Iraqi or any refugee to this country is $4,100. You know, I think to give you a comparable price tag, there's something called Operation Baghdad Pups, which is being run right now by some NGOs that they're trying to rescue the dogs that have provided comfort to our troops over there. They estimate their price tag at $4,300, and the process to get an Iraqi dog out of Iraq into the United States is substantially faster, and the level of effort is much less. But I kind of feel like we owe the interpreters and our allies a little bit more than the dogs.